Hi, hello everyone. This is Sabreen Mohammed. I'm the manager of health education and research with Heart, and I will let Naomi introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Naomi. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at the Feminist Women's Health Center, and we're very excited to be sharing with you all another workshop in our summer series with the DeKalb Reproductive Justice Campaign.
Thank you so much, Naomi. As Naomi has mentioned, this series has been ongoing since earlier in the summer, and we're hoping that the community is taking time to review these videos, but also we're interested to hear feedback from those of y'all who are interested to see these workshops advance and develop, and hopefully engage with us in some of our in-person programming in the future.
Thank you, Sabreen. So today's presentation is going to touch on birth control and family planning methods.
So, what is family planning and why should we as individuals plan to have a family? Um, Family planning involves a lot of steps that individuals should take. When thinking about family planning, the first thing that we really need to optimize and think about is ways of creating a family and deciding on how to create that family. With family planning tools, individuals have control over their fertility, how they use fertility treatment in cases of infertility, empowering themselves and having the tools, the language, and the support, whether it's, state support, familiar support, community support, and how to family plan, but also how to maintain healthy families. Um, Planning for children, whether you want to have them as an individual or not, thinking of ways that we can maintain healthy sexual lives without being inundated and forced to keep children in cases of, if an individual does not want to keep any children or does not want to have children. Also thinking about the medical conditions that can cause an individual to have a pregnancy that might be considered a high risk pregnancy for individuals that are either experiencing health complications or individuals that are using some type of pregnancy assisted technology similar to IVF. So when we're thinking about family planning, we got to consider, is planning the best option for you, right? And what is the best choice for you as an individual? There are different methods of planning that we will talk about in this presentation. Also, as part of our understanding of reproductive justice and what it looks like to have children in this society, having children should not happen without planning, but rather should be a decision that involves individuals that are seeking to maintain a healthy communication, healthy sexual intimacy, and also healthy familial relationships and maintaining a healthy childhood for this individual. Planning really helps us have kids only if we want them. So thinking about ways that as individuals we get to decide when we are on birth control, when should we not be on birth control in order to have children, when should we seek support, whether it's support through organizations similar to Heart or Feminist, or also reaching out to um, organizations that support in cases of terminating pregnancy, and what does that look like? Part of this presentation that we will talk about today is different methods of family planning. So first, we are going to talk about the hormonal methods. Second, we are going to talk about long-term or permanent methods. Third will be some of the barrier methods that are used for family planning. And lastly, some knowledge-based methods that will be covered in this presentation.
So one of the first methods that we're going to go over are methods that work with and without hormones. I'm sure many of you all have heard about the IUD. There are two types of IUDs. There's the hormonal IUD and there's the copper IUD. And the hormonal IUD has a few different brand names. Some of them are Mirena, Liletta, Skyla, Kylena. Skyla and Kylena are some of the newer versions of the IUD, and they're much smaller. And so depending on one's background or health history, those ones might end up being a little bit more comfortable for them. And the copper IUD does not utilize hormones, but utilizes copper. And we also have the implant that goes into the arm that is a different type of long-term birth control method. And so those are different options that folks can use for long-term birth control, which means that one doesn't have to be taking the birth control every day or every few weeks. It lasts for up to a few years, depending on which method one chooses, up until the time that either one wants to switch it out, discontinue, or it's expired. And then we have different hormonal methods. So I think one of the most common ones that many folks have probably heard of are the oral contraceptives, the birth control pills. There are different types of birth control pills. There are some that are progesterone only, and then there are others that are a mix. Some of those are also nicknamed as the mini pill. Sometimes when folks might just be starting out on their birth control journey, those might be the ones that they're interested in first trying out. But again, that depends on one's health history. There have been times that we've heard that that method might not be what's best for another person. And so, again, one should choose based on their own background. There's the vaginal ring that is utilized. There's also the patch that goes on the arm. There's the subdermal implant, and then there are the Depo-Provera injections that one can get once a month or every 3 months. And then there is Plan B, which is an emergency contraceptive. I do want to highlight that Plan B is not, it's in a little bit of a different category from these other forms of birth control, in that one can utilize Plan B in the form that it was created to prevent a pregnancy in the event that one did not have birth control beforehand. So Plan B is probably like the most generic name, but there's also Aftera and a few other names of emergency contraceptives that can be utilized in varying time frames after sexual intercourse to prevent pregnancy. And there are some other long-term methods that folks choose to utilize that are outside of these categories. And so one of those is a vasectomy. This is like a permanent surgical method that plenty of folks get, and it's safe and it's something that is permanent and lasts to prevent pregnancy. And then some folks opt for a tubal ligation, which is a surgery that removes the fallopian tubes. This is something that is also permanent. And so sometimes folks realize that they don't want to have children, or they don't want to have any more children, and this ends up being the best option for them, for their health or their background. And the reason that we started our presentation speaking about the different degrees and methods of these birth control offerings is because we recognize that different folks have different needs, different interests, and different backgrounds in health, and it's important that one chooses a method that is best for them and their circumstances. And then we have barrier methods, condoms. There are plenty of different types of condoms that can be utilized. We have many condoms that we include in our safe sex kits as giveaways at the Feminist Women's Health Center. And this might be one of the most easily accessible forms of birth control that one doesn't need to have, say, a prescription for, or need to come in regularly, and one can easily keep on them. And we encourage folks, if this is something that is comfortable for them to use, to include this in their methods. Sometimes folks will double up on methods too, depending on their level of comfortability, and utilize a hormonal form of birth control and also a barrier method. And then there are knowledge-based methods. There is the rhythm method. This is the calendar method where folks will track their menstrual cycle and their ovulation. And sometimes folks will even use one of those temperature recording devices, basal temperature, check their cervical mucus to recognize when they're ovulating, and choose to abstain from sexual activity during that time as a form of protection. And knowledge-based methods of fertility are planning methods in which we observe the body's external signs of fertility. And these reflect the hormonal changes that occur each cycle. And I do want to uplift that oftentimes when this method works the best is when one finds consistency in their cycle each month. And plenty of folks utilize this method if they're not able to utilize birth control, or if they don't want to have any of the permanent options. And it's a wonderful method for folks that it resonates for and works for. And then there is the cervical cap. I think that the cervical cap and diaphragm are making a little bit of a comeback now. with some newer versions that have been created. There have been some brands in Europe that have been transferred here to the States that folks can use. So the cervical cap, let's see, there's this photo right here. And the cervical cap is pretty much just what it sounds like. It's hollowed out, reusable silicone cap that's inserted into the vagina, fits tightly to the cervix, and it serves as like a cap, protecting the area from sperm. And then the diaphragm is something that's reusable. It's also a piece of silicone or rubber, covers the cervix, and then it's placed inside the vagina along with spermicide. Some providers recommend using the cervical cap with spermicide too. Spermicide is a liquidy substance, sort of like a gel that is used in conjunction with these methods that helps to kill sperm. And so both of these methods are inserted before sexual intercourse to prevent sperm from entering the uterus. And they're different forms of protection that don't utilize hormones and can be taken out. These are a few myths that we have around contraceptives. I'll let Sabreen take the lead on some of these questions.
Thank you. So we really wanted to make sure that, talking about contraceptives and the many ways that individuals are using contraceptives in their family planning, we wanted to acknowledge that there are some popular contraceptive myths out there. The first one being that, birth control prevents STDs, STIs. There are some barrier methods, the condom, that can reduce the possibility of contracting an STI, and, it can act as a barrier for certain STIs, but unfortunately, they're not foolproof. And when individuals are not using condoms, and, as an individual, you have opted to other forms of birth controls, that barrier does not exist. So addressing that, birth control does not prevent STIs, and there needs to be additional STI prevention measures that you as an individual will take with your partner, to make sure that, you're doing what you need to protect yourself from STI, whether it's testing, having conversations with your partner, wearing a condom, in addition to having some other form of birth control as a way of protecting yourself. Additionally, taking birth control ruins your natural fertility. This is a really popular myth, specifically in certain circles where a lot of misinformation is quickly spreading about birth controls. And unfortunately, that is not accurate, with the exception of more of a permanent birth control options like a vasectomy or removal of the fallopian tubes. Birth control does not really ruin your natural fertility. And it depends on really these conversations, and these hormonal fertility conversations needs to happen with a professional that can assess hormonal levels, can assess, have conversations and assess fertility measures, and acknowledge that, some people actually are still conceiving with the presence of certain birth controls, so addressing that is really important in this conversation, to acknowledge that unless you as an individual have decided to opt for more of a permanent birth control option, birth control does not really ruin your natural fertility as an individual. Third, you will gain weight on birth control. That a lot of individuals, a lot of professionals acknowledge that, birth control does have some side effects depending on what type of birth control is preferred for you as an individual, but there has not been any studies or any correlation that indicates that you as a person being on birth control will ultimately lead to weight gain in any form. Some doctors have acknowledged that when individuals are in the space of seeking a birth control option, they might have already dealt with some hormonal issues that will ultimately might lead to some weight gain, but there hasn't been a proven correlation between a birth control method and a weight gain for individuals that are on birth control. And lastly, we wanted to acknowledge that older women, older individuals can quit using birth control. Although there is a natural progression of fertility, specifically for individual with uterus, we also want to acknowledge that pregnancy can happen at later stages for individual with uteruses. So this is a conversation that needs to happen between an individual, their gynecologist, a professional that's aware of their fertility, that's aware of different types of birth controls that have worked for them, making sure that you don't stop using a birth control method because traditionally you have reached a certain age that is considered, I'm not getting pregnant because I'm in whatever, my late 40s. Making sure that you have that conversation with a provider to assess what you need and making sure that you just don't stop without having that proper assessment and proper conversation with a professional to support you in this process.
Thank you, Sabreen. And that reminds me about something we touched on during our last presentation around some of the statistics for folks who have contracted STIs and STDs who have been older, thinking that or receiving some misinformation they don't need to utilize birth control like the barrier method. And so that's important to uplift. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is one of our trivia questions that we will include in our resource deck for you all to fill out. And please feel free if you'd like to share your answers with us. We thank you so much for taking this time to connect with us and learn some of our offerings for our summer workshop series. We look forward to connecting with you all for our next presentation.
Thank you so much. And please feel free to provide any feedback and share with us how these short series have been helpful to you in any capacity. And what would you like to see from the DeKalb RJ campaign in the future? Thank you so much.